A symphony wrought in brass and chain. Come hither, good travelers, and hark to my lay of a child born 'neath gears where shadows play. Samachi's her name, with fingers so slight. She builds by moon and toils by light. With brass in her heart and steel in her spine, she speaks in the tongue of the cog and the line. Tick-tock, the gears do chime, a song spun through wheels of time. With spanner, keen, and hammer keel, she built wonders out of steel. Abandoned she was in a mill weathered gray, where wind through the rafters did whistle and sway. The groan of the beams, the creak of the floor, became her kin and the song she bore. Her sister, sweet Hannah, with balm in her hands, did guard her against fate's unkind demands. Tick-tock, the gears do chime, a song spun through wheels of time. With spanner, keen, and hammer keel, she builds wonders out of steel. But tread ye with care, beware her bright grin, for chaos lies close to the cogs within. The brave bear scars, the wise stay still, for folly comes swift, needs a match she's will. One twist, one spark, oh do take thy chance. Broken, poisoned as she watched the trap dance. From pistons that chatter to engines that roar, to traps that do snap and power its store. Yet love, unspoken, lies soft in the hum of wheels that turn and machines that drum. Her fingers do weave through the sinew of brass, and secrets unravel Eureka at last. Tick-tock, the gears do chime, a song spun through wheels of time. With spanner, keen, and hammer keel, she builds wonders of steel. She smiles so sly, with soot on her brow, a steam billow like a silken shroud. Come hither, come see, just a turn, just a twist, but fate won't respond with an iron fist. Yet still they follow, despite the fray, for her craft light rules where shadows stay. Her cradle's the mill where the great wind blow, where wooden gears and stone wheels groan. She dreams midst the clatter of ratchet and wheel, her lullaby sung by the hiss of steel. Though peril may dance under the timing clock, her heart ticks on like a golden watch. Tick-tock, the gears do chime, a song spun through wheels of time. With spanner, keen, and hammer keel, she built wonders out of steel. So lift thy cup to the clockwork wisp, with spirit so fierce and voice so crisp. For genius burneth where fools may flee, in gears, in steam, and machinery. Tick-tock, the echoes remain, a symphony wrought in brass and chain. Come hither, good travelers, and hark to my lay of a child born 'neath gears where shadows play. brave bear scars, the wise stay still. For folly comes swift, needs a match, she's a will. One twist, one spark, oh do take thy chance. Broken, poisoned as she watched the trap dance. From pistons that chatter to engines that roar, to traps that do snap and power its store. Yet love, unspoken, lies soft in the hum of wheels that turn and machines that drum. Her fingers do weave through the sinew of brass, and secrets unravel Eureka at last. Tick tock, the gears do chime, a song spun through wheels of time. With spanner, keen and hammer keel, she builds wonders of steel. She smiles so sly, with soot on her brow, a steam billow like a silken shroud. Come hither, come see, just a turn, just a twist, but fate oft respond with an iron fist. Yet still they follow, despite the fray, for her craft lights paths where shadows stay. Her cradle's the mill where the great wind blow, where wooden gears and stone wheels groan. She dreams midst the clatter of ratchet and wheel, her lullaby sung by the hiss of steel. Though peril may dance under the timing clock, her heart ticks on like a golden watch. Tick tock, the gears do chime, a song spun through wheels of time. With spanner, keen and hammer keel, she builds wonders out of steel. So lift thy cup to the clockwork rise, spirits so fierce and voice so crisp. For genius burning, where fools may flee, in gears, in sea, and machinery. Tick-tock, the echoes remain, a symphony wrought in brass and chain. Where shadows play, Samachi's her name, with fingers so slight. She builds by moon and toils by light. With brass in her heart and steel in her spine, she speaks in the tongue of the cog and the line. Tick tock, the gears do chime, a song spun through wheels of time. With spanner, keen and hammer keel, she builds wonders out of steel. Abandoned she was in a mill weathered gray, where wind through the rafters did whistle and sway. The groan of the beams, the creak of the floor, became her kin and the song she bore. Her sister, sweet Hannah, with balm in her hands, did guard her against fate's unkind demands. Tick tock, the gears do chime, a song spun through wheels of time. With spanner, keen and hammer keel, she builds wonders out of steel. But tread ye with care, beware her bright grin, for chaos lies close to the cogs within. The brave bear scars, the wise stay still, for folly comes swift, needs a match, she's a will. One twist, one spark, oh do take thy chance. Broken, poisoned as she watched the trap dance. From pistons that chatter to engines that roar, to traps that do snap and power its store. Yet love, unspoken, lies soft in the hum of wheels that turn and machines that drum. Her fingers do weave through the sinew of brass, and secrets unravel Eureka so sly, with soot on her brow, a steam billow like a silken shroud. Come
Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to the Siege of Vrax. Lord Inquisitor Hector Rex had dropped quite the bombshell on the still somewhat confused Marshal Kagori, but for us to get a better idea of what's happening, we should take a little bit of a trip back in time to when Hector Rex first began planning to subsume the 88th Imperial Guard siege army into the ranks of Ordo Malus. And it all started during an official gathering of the Conclave of Scaris, the inquisitorial gathering that determines many of the more high-ranking questions of inquisitorial importance within a sector. And in amongst all the varied decisions that such a body must take a position to, the excommunication of certain imperial individuals, the further investigation of other official personnel, etc., there was one item on the docket of particular importance. The request made by Lord Inquisitor Hector Rex to introduce the 88th Imperial Guard Krieg siege army into the ranks of the Inquisition's servants, and specifically into the service of Hector Rex. Now, of course, simply just taking over command of the 88th was entirely within the Lord Inquisitor's judicial purview, but such a massive and unilateral move on behalf of a single Inquisitor without at the very least first consulting the Conclave would be considered dangerous. Inquisitors may have unlimited power, but there are several other Inquisitors just like them, and if an Inquisitor is seen to marshal a bit too much in the way of personal power, especially without a good cause, then other Inquisitors may start to question his loyalties. And within the ranks of the God Emperor's most holy Inquisition, nothing is more dangerous than a loss of confidence. In this case, however, Lord Hector Rex seemed to have some fairly solid justifications for his request. A famous warp seer and scryer of the future named Malifus had predicted that the siege of Vrax would soon enter into a new and highly disturbing phase, where the forces of the ruinous powers would take a more direct hand in guiding the war, with the eventual aim of turning the entire planet into a demon world. If this was allowed to happen, not only would all of the armies on Vrax quite obviously be lost forever, it would also open up a literal portal to hell in the middle of the Scaris sector. This would, unsurprisingly, be an exceedingly undesirable outcome, since not only would it grant the traitors a safe port in the Scaris sector, it would also become a point of transit between Vrax and the Eye of Terror. The planet would be turned into a near unassailable fortress, a strong point of chaos influence, and a festering wound within the fabric of the Imperium. Destroying it would make the siege of Vrax look like child's play, because no mere Imperial Guard regiment would ever suffice to take on a demon-infested planet. Only the might of the Adeptus Astartes, deployed in multi-chapter strength, led by the most sacred of warrior orders of the Grey Knights, could ever even hope to cauterize the wound and stop the bleeding. And even if such a force could be gathered, if multiple Astartes chapters could be formed up, if a major commitment from the Grey Knights could be acquired, and even further support elements of Imperial Guard, Titan, and Navy resources could be marshaled, it would still be a question of decades before the planet could be secured, even by the most optimistic of estimates. Nothing short of a Crusader-level force would have any real chance of ever reclaiming Rux. This meant that the only truly realistic scenario was for a massive Imperial Navy force to be gathered, with which the system could be broken open and the ultimate sanction of Exterminatus carried out upon the planet. But frankly, the Scarus sector was not likely to be able to marshal such forces, and certainly not swiftly. The only real chance, Hector Rex argued, was to strike now and prevent the disaster before it was allowed to fully manifest. This notion immediately gained loud and vocal support from an organization within the Inquisition that Lord Hector had hoped to avoid. The Ordo Hereticus stood in full-throated support of the good Lord's suggestion that the war on Rux should be brought to a swift end, and that the 88th should be enrolled within the services of the Inquisition. However, they did not agree that it should be enrolled in the Ordo Malus. Rather, they were of the opinion that the Ordo Hereticus should be granted control over the 88th. For this was, after all, as reported, a question of heretical actions, specifically those of the renegade Cardinal, much more so than the threat of demons that would normally be the purview of Ordo Malus. They argued that if they could do their duty correctly and swiftly, then Ordo Malus would have no reason to step in. Additionally, the Ordo Hereticus Witch Hunter's Arm and their Ordo Militant, the Sisters of Battle, were directly involved in this conflict due to the heretic Cardinal's actions against his Sisters of Battle bodyguards. But Lord Hector was not overly fond of this idea. In his opinion, the Ordo Hereticus had their chance, and he suspected that they were the ones behind the assassination attempt on the Cardinal. Lord Hector also knew that it was indeed the Ordo Hereticus in particular that had lobbied so hard on behalf of the Victus Munistorum when it came time to decide the next leader of the 88th after the ousting of the Lord Commander Joker. Hector saw this as a little more than an ass-covering measure. The Ordo Hereticus had failed in picking up upon the renegade Cardinal in time, and once they had figured out his true intentions, they had botched the assassination attempt as well. As far as he was concerned, the Ordo Hereticus was directly responsible for what was happening on Vax right now. And he was worried that if push came to shove, the Ordo Hereticus would value their own reputation over the needs of the wider Imperium, and simply just pronounce Exterminatus on the whole planet and the 88th alongside it. As far as Hector was concerned, the Ordo Hereticus had already cost the Imperium millions upon millions of loyal lancemen in a war that never had to happen. He was not about to let them cost the Imperium millions more alongside an entire planet if he could help it. But whether or not he would be able to depended upon if he could convince the rest of the Conclave that his plan and his leadership was necessary. In preparation for this, the Seer and Malithus and several other witnesses, along with evidence and corroboratory testimonies, had all been prepared. Lord Hector's agents had also gotten a feel of how the other Inquisitors might vote, and it would appear that the Conclave was evenly split between supporting Hector's plans and supporting the Ordo Hereticus. It sounded then like a fair fight, but only fools and losers fight fair. Something Lord Hector Rex was more than aware of, and so, in his opening address to the Conclave, he went straight for the jugular. accusing the Ordo Hereticus of essentially failing the God Emperor's most holy mission, and stating that if the Conclave did not fully support his own motion, then defeat and failure were the only options left. This was quite the radical departure from the usually quite cordial tone at such conclaves. To put it into perspective, imagine standing up in a room and making a speech about your own plans, your political visions, and your ideas for the future, and those listening to you are essentially all sentient thermonuclear bombs. And that's pretty much an inquisitorial conclave, as every single one of them has the full might and power of the God Emperor's most holy Inquisition at their beck and call. Every last one of them can mobilize the full might of the Imperial Guard, the Imperial Navy, the Astropathic Choirs, or even request for cooperation with the God Emperor's Astartes. And with such a vast gathering of incredibly powerful individuals, you would be excused for expecting a certain level of decorum, since everyone would be very careful to avoid stepping on too many toes. But clearly Lord Hector did not have time for careful. A long day of seemingly endless debates then followed, with evidence, testimonies, claims and counterclaims being thrown back and forth across the conclave. Lord Hector was playing a dangerous game. He had hoped that his ringing denouncement of the Ordo Hereticus' actions would cause a few of the hardliners to take a step back and reconsider their position, and, perhaps even more importantly, what their position might look like if they were overestimating their own capabilities. If they were unable to seize control of the 88th away from Marshal Tori, so far the Marshal had done an annoyingly good job of it, then ultimate responsibility would fall upon their order. They would have been the ones who started it, and also the ones to fail in finishing it. The other orders would have a field day blaming the Ordo Hereticus for every ill that followed. Perhaps it was best to take a step back. Let Lord Hector have a crack at the problem. If he solved it, all well and good. The Ordo Hereticus may have suffered a minor scuff in the paintwork, but nothing more. And if Lord Hector was to fail, then that would only be further proof that the Ordo Hereticus needed to step forth and take center stage. And with the presumably previous failure of another Lord Inquisitor, and a protected general at that, the Ordo Hereticus was well insulated from any potential blame that an unsuccessful campaign might heap upon them. And so it was that Lord Inquisitor Balzac of the Ordo Hereticus decided to abstain. And taking their lead from their previous master, 3 other Inquisitors who had previously served under Lord Balzac also chose to abstain from the vote. This was just enough to allow Lord Hector's motion to pass by a measly 2 votes. If Lord Hector had hoped that his motion would have united the conclave behind him, he would most certainly be disappointed. But, despite the clearly fractured nature of the conclave, Hector had his mandate. And now he would have to follow up his coup in the conclave chamber with victories on the battlefield, to prove to everyone that he was indeed the correct man for the job, and to preempt any attempts on behalf of the Ordo Hereticus to seize the initiative. And the first step in ensuring battlefield success was not all that much different from the Inquisition compared to all of the previous people that had had to ensure battlefield success on class. Namely, more dudes. It's just the quality and type of dudes that the Inquisition have access to are perhaps of an order of magnitude greater than that which most Imperial commanders have access to. And to exemplify this, Lord Hector Rex picked up the space telephone in 40K, that being a actual living, breathing human, and sent a message to Titan to gather up a strike force of Grey Knights under the command of veteran Captain Stern to be dispatched immediately to Vrax aboard one of their strike cruisers. And feeling that he was still in need of more in the way of power armor, Hector Rex also made overtures towards other chapters. The Red Scorpions being one, since they had already been deployed to Vrax, they may be open for another deployment if the Inquisition modulated their language in the correct fashion and asked nicely. Another opportunity were the Dark Angels, but wow. Even the most optimistic of Inquisitors know better than to count on the Dark Angels. But hey, might as well send off a telegram and see if they responded. The odds were not great, but it didn't cost Lord Inquisitor Rex overmuch to try. And the third chapter he contacted were the Red Hunters. The Red Hunters chapter is a rather unique Space Marine formation. There are rumors even suggesting that the chapter was formed and founded at the behest of the Inquisition itself. And if these rumors are true, it would explain the Red Hunters' extraordinarily close relationship with the Inquisition, even going so far as to bear the inquisitorial eye upon their chapter icon. Something that suggests that not only are they quite fond of the God Emperor's most holy Inquisition, but that the Inquisition too are very fond of them. And so the Red Hunter's assistance was virtually assured, leaving Lord Hector with at the very least a strike force of Grey Knights,